If I'm not talking about security in the Lord, I generally am talking about confidence in the Lord. Um, in that vein, I want to start by talking about rockets. Everybody that knows me knows I like rockets. You know, I do rockets on Thanksgiving. We send up rockets just for the fun of it. I like making them and like sending them up. Well, there's a guy who likes rockets way more than I do, and he's rich. And so he can afford really big rockets, and his name is Elon Musk. And he owns Tesla car company, and he also owns SpaceX, space exploration company. That's what they do, see? And so on February 6th this year, he launched the most powerful operating rocket in the world today. This is the big, it's not as big as the Titan, but we're not using the Titan anymore. So anyway, I've watched videos of this launch again and again, you know, and the way it works, see, he has three tubes. He just sticks them together, and then with the payload on top, and so it's kind of a flat rocket. There's kind of an unusual look to it, but it flies fine. Anyway, and so I watched the videos of this launch and the recovery. His intent is to recover the tubes themselves, you know, the rocket part, so that he can reuse them, keeps the cost down. This guy's cost conscious. And so anyway, I watched the whole thing. I mean, the launch and the flight and the recovery and the whole thing. It gives this impression of a really a highly polished, complex, smoothly operating system. And as an added bonus, see, the payload on this thing, first time this thing's flown, the payload was Tesla's own Roadster. They launched his car. That's cool. You know, whoa, yeah. And so his car is out there sailing through space someplace on its way to Mars somewhere. And at the wheel, there's this mannequin dressed up in a spacesuit. He's steering along. This thing's flying around out there. That is, I'm telling you, this is cool. This guy, it's neat. Anyway, these three cores of this Falcon Heavy, which is what it's called, the name of the rocket is the Falcon Heavy. It consists of 9 of these Merlin engines. See, and so each one is 9, and each one has 9. See, so it's a total of 27 Merlin engines made by SpaceX right here in America. See, and so the cool thing about this is that if one or two of these engines fail on launch, except for the very heaviest payloads, this thing's going to keep flying. You know, okay, you can lose a couple, fine, keep going. You know, like a couple of cylinders on your motor. You know, the motor will still run, and these things will still fly. And so it's a fabulous machine, and it makes NASA look bad. You know, the best the government can do. But here, this guy, you know, it's private enterprise. What a wonderful thing. Anyway, and so the fact when this thing lifts off and it's actually going out into space, you see it going through the atmosphere, is an example of applied orbital mechanics. It's an example of metallurgy, engineering, computer science, chemistry, and you can't forget finance. These things are just as expensive as they are fabulous. I mean, you got to finance these things, big rockets. See, and so now and that brings us to something about science. See, science, it's at mathematics and chemistry and all that stuff. See, they have no physical presence in this world. See, they're real, nonetheless. They just don't have a physical presence. See, there's no such thing as a pound of computer science. You know, they don't come by the pound. You know, or a length of metallurgy, and nobody knows what mathematics smells like because they're not in the physical world. See, but the fact that our bridges and the airplanes fly are testimony to the fact that they really are real. These are real things. They just don't have a physical presence. They have an effect on our material world, see, like a rocket. Okay. Now, I'm unalterably convinced that science is real. You know, I believe it. I can see it every day. All right. Okay. And, you know, we live on the path where a lot of planes go down to San Francisco from up north. You know, and I see science flying by, the effects of it every day. See, but no science, you don't have any Ford or Chevy cars. It's obvious, right? See, but I don't think for a second that science applies itself to our physical world. See, suspension bridges, they don't build themselves. Rockets don't assemble and launch themselves. See, science has to be applied somewhere in that loop. Science has got to be applied by a mind. Somebody has got to apply the science somewhere, somehow. See, and so wherever you see a road or a sentence inscribed on a rock, or even a single word, or a computer program that consists of millions of lines of code, or even a simple nut or a bolt, any of that. See, without fail, behind these things, there is a mind. Behind that. And we can't let that escape us. This is huge. It's necessary. A mind is necessary for the existence of these things, even though our minds are real, but not part of the material world. Somewhere, there's always a mind. See, and that brings me to the computer program that's written in the cells of our bodies. Now, each one of our cells, 10 trillion cells, more or less. Okay, and in each one of those cells, with the exception of our blood cells don't have nucleus, but the rest of the cells do. Okay, and so in the center, it's a region called right there is a cell nucleus, which is set off from the rest of the cell by this nuclear membrane. See, and in the center of those cells lies a region. Well, anyway, if you could get into that nucleus, if you could reach in there with this really tiny pair of tweezers, you could get in there and you can grab a hold of this long molecule. And it's got a name that long, which we just call it DNA. I can't even pronounce the name. All right, but it's there. Takes a half a page to write the name of it. But anyway, you could draw this thing out of that cell, and by that, you got a hold of it. You stretch the thing out. It's about 6 feet long. This thing is a long molecule, but it's so thin you can't see it anyway. Even if you had a hold of it, you can't see it without a microscope. And when it's coiled up, even when it's all coiled up and it's tight, a little lump, you still have to have a microscope to see it anyway. But it is 6 feet long, roughly. Okay. And so anyway, see, the thing about this molecule is that the structure of the molecule carries a program, a computer program on that. See, and this information, it's not like a computer program information. This fits the bill. It is a computer program. It just is. There's no difference. And whatever words you use to describe a computer program also describes the information found on this molecule. See, and it's responsible. It's the most complex computer program we've ever seen. It's more than Windows 10 requires millions of lines of programming, and this has more than that. Okay, and so anyway, it's responsible to operate all the molecular machinery that we have in our body that keeps us going, right? Okay, so it's got the blueprint of every protein used in our body. It regulates the amount of them. It regulates the design of them. Like in insulin, for instance, we actually have several different insulin molecules that we use, not just the one. We can get by with the one, but we have different ones and all those blueprints are right on this long 6 foot, 6 foot computer tape, I guess. You could say it like that. See, it functions exactly like a roll. Remember those player pianos? And you'd have these rolls that I used to. Anybody remember Sutros? Down there in San Francisco, and you'd have a player piano. You could put a quarter in this thing and play you a tune, and you could see the roll of paper going around, and it had little holes punch in it, and there was little air pressure, and it would play the keys. See, all right, that's a program. The magnetic tape on those early IBM computers, you remember, like that. The programs are written on that, and it's by magnetism in this case. The hard drives in our computer, they do the same thing, see? And on that strand of DNA I'm talking about, It's the same things done with chemicals and the shapes of those chemicals. Say, so now our regular computer programs are written with zeros and ones, and it doesn't matter what they represent. Really, as on and off switches. You could do the same thing with water valves if you wanted. We could calculate with water or steam valves. It'd just be really slow, not many cycles per second. But these are on and off switches, and they operate really quick. And so in our DNA, though, the computer language is different. Still a computer language, but it consists of it's 4 different chemicals. And the combination of series of 3 of these, there's a 64 possible combinations, so you end up with 64 letters, a programming language consisting of 64 letters. And it's a much more compact system, see, but here's the thing that we can't, you've got to get this firmly fastened in your mind. It is a program. It is. That's what it is. See? It has language, it's got syntax, and everything having to do with the program. And it has an effect in the physical world because here we are, right? This program has an effect. This, all right? And so what I'm getting at, see, is if you have a computer program, then somewhere behind that program, there must be a mind. All right? Now, I believe in science. I don't believe in magic at all. Programs don't write themselves, and they especially don't write themselves by accident. That never happens. See, if there's a program written in our cells, then it demonstrates the existence of a supreme software engineer, and it can't be otherwise. You see, if you take a look at the foundational claim of evolution is that this program wrote itself, say, that somehow it arose by chance. Say, the claim is this is so extraordinarily far outside of human experience, it's universal human experience, that any proof of such a claim, it has to be equally extraordinarily compelling. It's got to be. If you want to prove something like that, you better have some serious proof. A little bit of proof, a little evidence here and a thumbprint there is not going to cut it. See, a pile of bones does not qualify as extraordinary proof. That's not good enough. That isn't good enough. Bones or no bones. Layers of rock, no layers of rock. See, computer simulations notwithstanding, no matter how loudly those who believe in evolution speak, programs still don't write themselves. Anywhere that we've ever seen. Anywhere that anybody's ever seen. Therefore, God is. The existence of the program requires the existence of God. He must be. It's required. He has no physical presence in this world. Did for 30 odd years, but not at the moment. Nevertheless, without a doubt, he does affect this world physically just as much as any of the sciences do. More so, in fact. Now, this is a simple argument, but it's one you can take to the bank. Stand on it and never allow yourselves to be moved. Any computer program requires a computer programmer. Foundational principle. Has to be. And that brings me to prophecy. Okay. Just as any program in this world has a programmer as its source, then any true prophecy in the world requires a prophetic source. There's got to be a source. And that source either has to have total knowledge of history or the ability to control history, or both. Doesn't make any difference, probably both. The more unlikely the prophecy is, and the more time between the prophecy and its fulfillment, then the more evident that the origin of the prophecy is a supernatural being. Now, take this prophecy against Tyre, for instance. It's found in Ezekiel 26. Ezekiel had been taken to Babylon. The prophet Ezekiel, he'd been taken to Babylon 12 or so years before Nebuchadnezzar finally just went in and took everybody around Jerusalem and the whole northern kingdom away. Just took them all away. So the final fall of Jerusalem, that happened around 586 BC. Depends on who's doing the history. Anyway, in Ezekiel 26, he makes this proclamation concerning Tyre, and he sums it up on this list on the screen. I guess it's up there. He said, for instance, in the 3rd verse, a lot of nations are going to come up against Tyre. He says, now the walls of Tyre are going to be broken down. Dust would be scraped from her. And you can read the list. I'm not going to read the list. We're running a little bit behind. See, and so Tyre was the wealthiest city of the Phoenician trading empire. It was, at the time, this thing was important. It was a city of art and business. They bought and sold everything from slaves to nuts. That was their business. Their business was buying and selling, trade. That was it. See, and the city had walls that were commensurate with its wealth. The point is, see, a lot of wealth means really big walls, right? That's you got a lot to protect, so you're going to make big walls anyway. See, and so the prophet, he gives these 8 specific predictions about this great city, which all occurred during a period from about 587 BC to 332 BC. See, this is a span of more than 2.5 centuries. The city was there a long time. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, according to him, this was 1, 2, 3, 4th from the end. Nebuchadnezzar did invade the city, did attack the city, just like the prophet said. Began a siege against Tyre, and he breached the walls after 13 years. Had to fight 13 years to get through, but he did. And so, but before he was able to breach the walls, what had happened was that most of the population, there was an island about a half mile offshore, so they just moved out there and built another city and another wall, also called Tyre. And so it was about, so Nebuchadnezzar, even though he did break through the walls of the city and he got in there, he never got paid for it. He never got any spoils. Because these guys had taken everything and moved offshore. See, and by the way, that was predicted by Ezekiel too in chapter 29, verse 18. Anyway, so 255 years after that, actually it was less 13 years, 255 with a 200, so roughly 240 years later, Alexander the Great, he finished the job. He attacked Tyre. He built a causeway out of the island. He used the debris from the mainland city, and he was getting pretty desperate. I mean, they were running out of material. He's using all the rocks from the city and the walls and everything like that, and he ran out of materials, and so they started scraping the dirt off until they got down to bedrock and built this half-mile causeway out to the city so he could attack it. And he employed a mercenary and naval force, which were hired from several different nations, which, that part of the prophecy was fulfilled too. Many nations will come against you. And anyway, that was the first prophecy. The island, that the city was built on, that's underwater now. That thing's sunk. I don't know why. Maybe the sea level raised or whatever. Anyway, it's underwater. But, the fishermen still, on the original area where Tyre was built, fishermen still use the rocks, or did until fairly recently, use them to dry their nets and repair the nets and all that. See? And so there's a city near the original location, though. That's there. Now, my point is this, out of all this, that this guy named Ezekiel, some unknown dude, he's just out there. He's almost 6 centuries before Christ. Who knows who Ezekiel is? Ezekiel. What kind of a name is that? He's just out there. And so he knew the history. He knew a very unlikely history about this major city at the time. He wrote his prophecy down. It's been transmitted from generation to generation. It's available to us to read this morning if you want to. It's been certifiably fulfilled. You can go out and look at it yourself if you want to. It's been fulfilled in the physical world, and yet there's no way for this man to have known these things, and yet he did. See, I don't believe in magic. I don't read tarot cards. I don't read we don't even get the paper. I don't read my horoscope. don't care. All right? I don't read chicken entrails. But I do believe in a supreme programmer. I believe in a supreme software engineer. And I believe that the information that this man had to have come from a being to whom all time is the presence, or else he has the power to control historical events, or both. I think it implies both. Now, that was a long time ago when that happened. Okay, that was more than 2 millennia ago. We're still talking about that. Well, see, the thing of it is that there are far more unlikely prophecies that are being fulfilled as we sit here. I was going to say as we stand. As we speak. I'm speaking, you're not. But as we speak, there's things going on that are even more unlikely. Who cares what Israel does? Anybody give a rip, really? Israel. Why should anybody care what Israel does? What in the world is such a big deal about Israel? It's one of the smallest countries in the world. You know how big it is? It's about the size of New Jersey. It has about the same population. You could fit 8 Israels with room to spare in the state of Florida. In terms of being able to project military power, Israel can't, except for just the very few nations right around it. It's not a serious threat to any developed nation anywhere. It's just, it's a tiny nation. There's no reason for this tiny nation to occupy more than a moment's thought by anybody anywhere in the whole world. It's too small to be. It's like Liechtenstein. Who worries about Liechtenstein? There's no there. And yet, when Yitzhak Rabin died, he was prime minister of Israel, and he had a funeral on November 6, 1995. That funeral was attended by at least 80 nations, representatives from 80 nations. It was attended by President Clinton, First Lady Hillary, former presidents Jimmy Carter and Herbert Bush, various other dignitaries from the administration, senators and representatives from both houses, Governor of New York, George Pataki, New York Mayor Giuliani, and former New York Mayor Ed Koch. Yeah, all these guys were there. And that was just from our country. And yet we had, France, England, Germany, everybody. All the developed nations sent officials, and many third world countries were in attendance too. And we all know why they were there. We know that. We got it. See, our people were there for the same reason that all the other nations are there. The Mideast is a powder keg. That because of the alignment of political forces, which have been brought about by the simple existence of Israel, it could set off World War III at any time. Okay? It's in the interest of us all that war not be fought. We don't want that war fought. It's going to require, it'll be a nuclear exchange if it's fought. It's the presence of this tiny nation in that exact location that causes so much anxiety in the entire world. It's like this giant, irritating boil. It would be so much easier if you could just get rid of Israel. Everything be fine. It'd all go away, right? But my point is this. Who would have thunk it? It's a tiny, who would have thought that? Who would have guessed that a nation not even 50 years old at that time would find itself at the very center of attention of the nations of the world? Who would have thought that? See, somebody did think it though. And they thought it more than 2,500 years ago. He thought it when Israel was nothing but a small outpost of the Medo-Persian Empire, way back when. those guys back then had to get permission from King Cyrus to even rebuild their temple. They couldn't do it on their own. Zechariah was this guy's name. And in the prophecy I'm referring to is Zechariah 12, 2 through 9. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to refer to it. You're going to have to read it. I will make a little bit of it. Jerusalem, a cup of trembling, burdensome stone for all people. All the people of the earth are going to be gathered together against it. This all in 2 and 3. And on. And they're going to devour the people around. They're going to be, on and on. You can read it. See, but what does God mean? Jerusalem's going to be a cup of trembling. Why would he be talking about that? That didn't make any sense. At that time, Israel was just a small outpost. They had to have they had to have permission from King Cyrus to even rebuild their temple. They still were nothing but a small outpost of the Roman Empire when Jesus presented himself as their king on Palm Sunday nearly 2,000 years ago. And they became even less than nothing when the Romans threw them off their land in AD 70 and made it a capital offense for any Jew to ever go back to that region. Come back here and we'll kill you. See? And so they're gone for nearly 2,000 years. Long, long time. See, but Zechariah predicted that Israel would not stay nothing. Not going to stay nothing. He predicted not only would this nation occupy the attention of the nations of the entire world, but it would fill them with fear when they did. True. Not only would they not stay nothing, but they would decisively win every war they fought. In verse 9, we can see that it's the intent of the one who is responsible, the one who's behind, the mind who is behind this amazing turn of events, that Jerusalem is going to be the cause of the destruction of every nation that comes against her. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers. Okay. Revelation 2:9, Psalm 2:9, and Revelation 2:27. So, when the President of the United States, he decides, well, we're going to put our embassy in Jerusalem, right? The capital of this tiny nation who can't be any kind of a threat to any developed nation. Why should anybody care? Who cares? It shouldn't make any difference. Nevertheless, the leaders of the nations protest, their citizens riot, and the world diplomats say, oh, that's terrible, terrible. They said, that big stir when Trump decided to do that. Okay, who would have thunk it? What is that? What is that? The ancient prophet had access to information that could only have come from somebody, one, capital O, one who stands outside of time and has the power to control the history of the world. I don't believe in magic, not a bit. But I do believe that since Scripture was right about Jerusalem, that fearsome war is in fact going to be fought. Jerusalem is going to be right smack dab in the middle of it. And 2,500 years is a long time between a prophecy and its fulfillment. A lot of generations between then and now. And here we are witnessing it. We're the generation that gets to see this actually happen. It's in the history books now. Okay? So, it's time for the invitation to the God who controls history, to the God who's smack dab in the middle of world events this very second. Every single one of them. Dean?